Hey Josh, how's it going?
Hey Elliot, not too bad. How about yourself?
Oh, doing pretty good. How was your weekend?
It was busier than I wanted it to be. I'm in the process of turning over one of our rental properties, so I had to spend a lot of Saturday putting that back together, just some minor repairs and doing some cleanup, get ready to schedule some tours with some potential new tenants. And then yesterday was busy doing some car maintenance type stuff and had some family over for dinner. How about you?
Well, before we get to me, I don't want to leave the audience hanging from our last episode. Did you find the source of your antifreeze smell?
I did, yeah, that's right. I had a little tiny crack on the top of my radiator. There's a plastic piece that surrounds the metal fins or whatever, and it was just leaking just a little bit, so enough that it was like blowing through the fan and bringing that odor into the cab. So I did some research. I thought about getting a brand new radiator, but then looked at which the cost is relatively low for that, like $150, which not too bad. But I was going to do it myself, and I still will. But until then, I found a simple solution where I just got some JB Weld and watched a handful of YouTube videos where people were using that as a temporary fix. And some people have said that it lasts for years. So I'm giving that a try. So going back to our conversation where we talked about cheap versus frugal, this is probably on the cheap side, but I'm saying it's temporary. And you can follow up with me in 6 months and see if I've fully fixed the radiator or not. If it's not leaking, though, I might just keep rolling with it.
You didn't just slap some duct tape on it, huh?
Well, that was the first fix. I did actually put a piece of duct tape on it because, as you know, I had to come and pick you up for our local Choose FI meetup, and I did actually, in fact, put a piece of duct tape over the crack, and it held for a couple days until I got the a slightly more permanent fix in place.
You heard it here first. Duct tape fixes everything.
That's right.
As far as my weekend, yeah, it was pretty busy. My daughter had her first soccer game of the season, so I managed to get out and watch the game. So this is the first year where they have goalies, so that was an exciting endeavor. She actually played goalie for a little bit. And then we also had some family that was in from out of town, so we got to spend some time with them as well, which was great.
Nice. A lot of outside time. It's been a beautiful time of year right now for us here. I'm curious about the soccer. My kids played a little bit of soccer when they were little. Is this still kind of the herd phase where all of them are bunched up and just going from one end of the field to the other?
Sure. Yeah, it certainly is still hardball. You maybe every once in a while you'll see an actual pass that would constitute like, hey, I'm crossing to the center of the field and somebody else tries to score. But yeah, dusting off the cobwebs at least for the first game of the season.
Do they keep score? Is there a winner and a loser?
I mean, I don't think that there's supposed to be, but all the kids certainly know that is paramount in their mind is what was the final score.
That's good. I think that's beneficial, a little healthy competition.
Yes. Yeah, it builds character,
That's
right?
right.
There are believe it or not, there are winners and losers in most games.
Yeah. Well, except for in soccer where they have that nasty draw.
Hey, eventually there are still tiebreakers and the big enough game there will not be a tie. So,
Yes.
yes, as a lover of soccer over here, or football as my UK counterparts would say, they do resolve those ties in the
Mhm.
end. But all of this is a wild tangent. So, what are we talking about today, Josh?
Yeah. Speaking of our time with family and friends over the weekend, we wanted to talk about community and how we built our FI community both before and in my case after retirement, and just kind of counterpoint each other and talk through what that has looked like and how it has evolved over time. So Elliot, let's start with your story. So just kind of thinking back, and I think we found the Phi community around the same time back in like 2014. But maybe even if you wanted to go further back than that, or what it's looked like since 2014. How has that evolved for you, and what does that community look like in your case?
Yeah, I would say that I'm pretty similar to most people that when we come straight out of college or things of that nature, a lot of your community is tied up in work. So I was in the consulting world. You definitely felt wrapped up with your coworkers. The mantra work hard, play hard was certainly there. So I would say back in the day, the lines between work and play blended because I was just with those people so frequently. And of course, then you have family that's always there. And then for me, older friendships that I had from high school, college, elementary school, etc. I kind of had all of those. How about you? What was your community really based upon?
Very similar. And just as you know, I started having kids pretty young. I was in my early 20s when we had our first. And then 2.5 years later, the second, 2.5 years after that, the third. So it was busy with my 20s were busy with little kids and still kept in close contact with my long-term friends. So like you, I'm blessed to still have really strong connections with friends that I made 35 years ago and some that I made have made like 25 years ago. Some of those that were a connection through our kids' friends. And it's interesting in some cases the kids have kind of grown apart, but the parents have in closer contact, which is kind of an interesting thing. But I think I was very similar. I wasn't as close with coworkers. I remember that I would prefer to be in smaller groups. So I usually would go to lunch with the same person or the same group of one or two people every day, but I didn't really branch out. I wasn't big on going to big social events with big groups of people from work. So work was a slightly smaller community for me. Neighbors has always been one that's been similar, where it's like one or two close neighbors, but never like the big block parties. I know I've been to your house where it's like you guys are all saying hi to each other, like you all know each other. Kind of a throwback to maybe simpler times, it seems like, in your neighborhood, which is really cool. You have a really great community there from what I've seen. But yeah, I didn't have much more outside of that prior to joining the fire path.
Like you alluded to in recent times, just kind of mirrors your story as well. Once kids entered the picture, I would say we became closer with neighbors, born out of, hey, our kids are around the same age. They want to play together on the street or at each other's houses, things of that nature. Also, I had different hobbies. Like I used to go to the rock climbing gym quite frequently and play soccer. And so I had kind of those communities that I built friends out of those shared activities as well. But yeah, that was certainly true of how I felt like I built community. So, how did it feel in your circle of friends when you first found Phi?
I don't really think that I shared it too much. I think that to answer your question, it felt a little bit like I had this new information that I wanted to share. But as I started to kind of sprinkle it out there, and we talked about that in some other episodes, it wasn't really met with the same level of enthusiasm that I had. So I kind of kept it to myself for the most part. I didn't share too much. And I just kind of kept my head down and kept learning and experimenting with different levers that I was going to pull so that I could eventually reach that point where I could retire early. But I would say that it felt like I was a little bit alone. And I did want to find more like minded people. It took me a little while to get there. But how about for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can certainly be isolating, right? Is when you find this concept. For me, I just felt like I wanted to spread it to the world. And I know, similar to the example that you shared in your origin story of when you stumbled on Mr. Money Mustache and you told your coworker, and and was like, look at how great this was. For me, I don't think that that's died out for me. Is probably all my friends, even that are not in the FI community, are sick of hearing about personal finance or FI or anything else. But I think I just see the benefit is so great on the other side, and I'm trying to bring people along with me in any way that I can. And so, like I shared on previous episodes, I had the opportunity to do some coaching with a brother-in-law, that's 19, and just the example that how far ahead he will be because he has the power of time on his hand. I mean, it's life-changing. We have a mutual acquaintance, right? In Drew, who is a member of our local chapter and was also a former coworker of mine, that I mentioned on a previous podcast that I thought I had introduced him to FI, but I wasn't 100% sure. And he actually did his case study this past week, and lo and behold, he called me out and said I did indeed introduce him to the concept. And so now this is an example of somebody that is now retired, and how great that feels to say even the small part that I had in hopefully changing somebody's life. Not to say that that was some great thing that I did, but he's living proof of the butterfly effect that we can have on other people.
Absolutely. Well said. I think that's got to be very rewarding to you to be able to feel that and see that in him and see the things that he's been able to do with his life. And that's, like you said, you never know what kind of impact you're going to have with somebody else if you just share the message. And that's what we're trying to do with this podcast here. And maybe we'll eventually reach more people and be able to share some of these ideas. I am seeing just very start or beginning of that effect where I brought my friend George to the meetup this last week. This was his first introduction. I've been talking to him for a couple of years about why I wanted to retire early, the concepts of financial independence. And I think he started to see it. It started to click when he came to the meetup for the first time. So that was really cool to, and he thanked me multiple times there, as well as he sent me a message later that evening saying that he was going to be at the next one. So it's really cool to be able to bring those people along and hopefully in some way make their lives a little bit better.
Right. It is very interesting. And like you said, part of what our goals are for this podcast, one of them is hopefully we do impact somebody's life, that they do make a change that ultimately makes their life better. I had a previous coworker reach out to me after our intro into the world of our podcast, and just reach out and start a dialogue. And this is somebody that I felt like I was probably pushing pretty hard, was one of my best friends at my old company. And to just start that conversation is great that this platform is resurfacing some of those conversations.
Yeah, very cool. So if you think back to the early days of whenever you discovered the path, did you ever go out of your way to attend any in-person events?
I did. So in my origin story, I did say, hey, I found Mr. Money Mustache back in 2014. I didn't immediately start going to events then. I would say that I think I started going to our local chapter in probably 2018, I want to say 2018, 2019. So that was back when our St. Louis chapter, the idea of gathering was pretty much going to a brewery once a month, and you would kind of do your elevator pitch of here's who I am, and you know etc. And it was small. It was probably no more than 10 or 15 people at the apex of our gatherings. And in all honesty, it was pretty stale because, like, once you met the same 10, 15 people, really, there wasn't anything else that was kind of going along with that. Is if you did have kind of a deep connection with somebody, you could continue to refine and deepen that relationship. And I would say that I did have that opportunity with one of our members that is still in the group today. But outside of that, it wasn't very deep.
Was it similar to
How about,
a group of people from like work going out for a happy hour?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It was, you kind of do your, hey, what's going on with you? How was your weekend? And nobody really cares. If you were talking, I'm already thinking about what I'm getting ready to say to make myself sound interesting. It just seemed very, very surface level.
There wasn't a whole lot of talk about FI concepts or like trying to help each other out with different things.
So I will say the one thing that we did that was pretty cool and is probably why I deepened my relationship, shout outs to Tom, is we had kind of a mastermind group where it was smaller. I think we had 4 people that we just agreed that we were going to meet more frequently outside of the group. So we said, hey, let's all write down our 1, 3, 5 year goals, and then let's try and reverse engineer to say how are we going to actually achieve those. And then this was an accountability group to say, all right, what meaningful progress have you made by the next meeting that we would come together, much like you would in having a gym partner or something else like that, instead of that internal motivation, having that external force that's helping you stay accountable.
Yeah. Well, that sounds rewarding. And that's something that I kind of look for in relationships. And you and I have talked about outside of this format is if we have a goal in mind or something that we're trying to work towards, how can we help each other out by discussing it more frequently and having that accountability buddy? So that is beneficial.
Absolutely. Do you remember your first time coming to a local meeting?
Oh, yeah. So I went about things sort of backwards. If I go back a little bit further beyond the point where I decided to get involved in the community more, in my, I would say, 30s and early 40s, it was all about kids' activities. And as they got older and into high school, it was just more and more busy. So we were going in multiple directions every night of the week and on the weekends and had very little time for even thinking about friends and community. And it, as they got older, though, and finished high school, it became more apparent that I'm going to have a lot more free time on my hands. And I was starting to lose some of those connections with those people that I was closer to or that I saw at least on a weekly, sometimes daily basis around baseball and basketball, cross country, and things like that. So that's when I started to think about how can I try to insert myself into some of these areas of interest that I have. For me, I actually started with real estate meetups because at the time I started investing in real estate back in 2016 and I wanted to find people that I could kind of bounce ideas off of and learn from. And I remember attending a local meetup that was like me and 2 other guys showed up, and it was at a local brewery. And then one of the guys ended up just dominating the conversation. He wanted to impress us. He just talked and talked and talked. And I left there thinking, man, why would I want to attend a meetup? Like, is this what this is like? It was terrible. I said like 10 words the entire time. And I think the other guy was similar. So then I tried a couple of virtual events, and those were maybe a little bit better, but it was still very dominant by 1 or 2 people, and the rest of us were just like sitting there listening or whatever. And then for whatever reason, I think back in 2023, I had a New Year's resolution where I'm like, I want to just get myself out there, put myself out into like a bigger format where there's more of a chance that I wouldn't be in a small group of like 2 people who are going to over dominate the conversation. If those people aren't good to communicate with, I can move over here to these other people. So I heard a lot about economy and just jumped into the deep end and bought a ticket then. They were a whole lot easier to come by. And I think we bought our ticket in January or February for the March event. And that was the first in person event that I attended. And I drug, well, I say drug, but it wasn't something that Lori was interested in at the time, but I kind of begged her to go and she agreed. So we went to that and it was very eye opening It was overwhelming. It was exciting. We had just so many emotions after that first couple of days because there's so many activities that you can do. And I remember the speed friendshipping being the one where we really found the people that we sat with at our table initially before we split out and to go find other people. So we sat with those people for the first hour or whatever it was and really connected with them, the eight of us or something. And those are the people that we probably spent the most time with throughout the rest of the weekend because a lot of them were first time attendees as well. But that was my first event. And then as we were there, then we started learning more about Campfire. I had heard about it before on podcasts or reading about it in blogs. And shortly after that, we signed up for Campfire, which was a much smaller scale event. And we really enjoyed that a lot. And for me, I appreciate being in a smaller group and bouncing around to a lot of different conversations all at the same time can be a little bit overwhelming to me as being somewhat of an introvert. But how about you? How did those things kind of evolve? So your local group started to fade or maybe wasn't exactly what you were looking for. How did you transition to the next thing?
So I think with the local chapter, I started to fizzle out a little bit, and that was probably right near probably the later end of 2019. So then, of course, COVID kind of reared its ugly head and to a degree fixed that problem is all of a sudden the group wasn't meeting. However, there were also a couple of things that happened. So the person that was kind of like our local admin for the chapter at the time, him and his wife moved down to Florida. But then we started meeting online during COVID. So, of course, looking for community, any excuse to kind of have people outside your immediate four walls. I remember going to online, like Zoom style meetings during COVID for a while. And then eventually on the other side, once our new iteration of our chapter started up again, started coming back.
And it's been really neat to see our local group grow so significantly over the period of time. I had the pleasure of being at the very first meetup where there was like 8 or 10 of us, if I remember right. And now this last meetup we had 50 people. It's grown significantly in just a couple of years.
Yeah, no kidding. And that's only 2 years since the group's really been rebooted. Pretty incredible growth. So that does bring up a question that I wanted to ask, or really a point of clarification. So, what year was that first economy and campfire that you went to?
2023.
So, I know that after you went to economy and campfire, like those are those transformative experiences that you just described. And how did that change your feelings upon coming back to the local chapter?
Yeah, well, I think maybe to add one point there on economy, what really stood out to me was that I met a lot of people that were on the same path or maybe had already gotten to the point of early retirement and spent so many years reading and listening to conversations not in real life that meeting them in real life and also being there side by side with my wife Lori where she was hearing and seeing the same thing, it gave me a lot more confidence that, hey, this is a real thing. That this isn't just people out there in the internet that are faking it or telling a story. Like, this is just average people that made this choice and did these things, and now they don't have a traditional W 2 job. So that really gave us an opportunity to sit back and go, okay, what do we want the rest of my career to look like, or what kind of time frame do I want to give myself for work before I decide to retire early? And it was in our hotel room at Economy that we kind of mapped out the next 2 years and decided, okay, we want to cross these milestones. Some of them were financial and some of them were more family oriented. And we looked at that 2 year time frame. Didn't have an exact end date in mind, but I knew that it was approximately 2 years. And from there, we just really set forward a plan that I stuck to. I ended up leaving almost exactly 2 years from the day of that first economy. But I think going to that big scale event is very cool. But again, for me, I'm a bit more of an introvert. Bouncing around to a lot of those different conversations can be a little bit exhausting. And then pulling it back into a local group, that's been really fun because I've met a lot of new friends like yourself, and we've had those closer connections and been able to do things in the group, but also outside of the group and have some more of that one on one or small group setting activities. And that's been probably the most rewarding part.
So you're saying blessing and a curse. I mean, you got to meet a lot of cool people at Economy, but then you got stuck with me.
And I met you at Economy too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in
Yep.
2024. So maybe this might be a good spot to start to shift. Building community before Phi certainly is one thing, but now I'm going to lean on you a little bit and start saying, well, what does building community after retirement or post Phi really look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think that it has changed too much from pre-fi or pre-RE. It's just being intentional. And for me, it was really getting out of my comfort zone and putting myself out there. And I still have to do that. To my inner dialogue is often when it comes to just even attending the local groups is, and I live the furthest away from most of the events, and my first reaction is, nah, I don't need to go tonight. I don't want to go tonight. I'm tired. It's been a long day. But I really have to put forth the effort. And then once I'm there, I have a great time. And it's so much fun to interact with all the people.
So maybe let me ask a different question. Do you think that there were hobbies that you started to take on or different activities that you took on in your post Phi life that have increased your community that you didn't have prior to retirement?
Yeah, for sure. I've started running, as I may have talked about in a previous episode, and that's been meeting new people and conversing online and just interacting in a different way with a different community that's completely outside of the Phi community. And then there's others that I'm interested in getting into. So I like to bike, and there's a biking community that is local that does like a Tuesday night ride, they call it. I think it's once a month that I've been wanting to become a part of for literally years now. And I don't know exactly what's holding me back, but I haven't joined that. Probably the same thing like I just talked about. I had to really get out of my comfort zone and attend the local Phi group. I need to get out of my comfort zone and just put my bike in my truck and drive there and be okay with it, because once I go, I'm probably going to be fine and want to go back. And then there's other interests that I have, like woodworking and hiking, that I know there's communities for that I'd like to become a part of. So I find a lot of value in it, but my initial reaction is like, that sounds really cool, but I'm a little more nervous. I get in my head about whatever, I don't know what it is, that I make an excuse not to do those things. But it is beneficial and rewarding to be around people and to be with people and to share similar interests. And I need to do more of that. So I have the time for it now, but I tend to stick with interests that are more solo oriented, except for podcasting, of course. But thankfully, I can't imagine sitting here and talking into a mic by myself.
Well, don't count it out quite yet, Josh.
What do you think about when you think about your eventual early retirement? I know you have a couple of communities and groups that are outside of the Phi world, but where do you think you'll see yourself spending your time?
Yeah, obviously, where I am in this phase of life is going to mirror a lot of what you've previously gone through. Having young kids, a lot of my time is going to be dominated to them more than anything else. Is their extracurriculars, like you said, I expect to build community out of my kids' friends, parents, and stuff like that. We already see that today is her soccer coach lives around the corner from us. We'll go have a drink together or have food together or stuff like that. Or we run across the street and we're friends with them. We've played board games with them or just any number of things. But as far as other like hobbies and things of that nature is prioritizing health. In the past, I've been a part of a gym that was small group sessions where it was led by a trainer. And so that was very nice to have that built in community of no more than 6 individuals at a time. It's not like we're sitting there talking while we're working out, but at least you have that bond with those people that you see showing up week in and week out. As far as other activities, I like board gaming. So outside of my family and people that I play with here, it's just kind of those longer term friends. That's certainly a hobby that I would say I have somewhat of a community in. I would say I also want to have more solo hobbies. I really enjoy eating good food. My parents were near gourmet chefs by hobby, and so I aspire to eat that level of food, but I need to make more strides to be able to cook it myself. So that's something that I certainly want to take on in a post-fi life and do more of now. Spend more time in the kitchen and learning different techniques and making food not only for myself but my family.
I'd like to be a part of that
And I'm
community.
sure I've got other things, but yeah. I mean, like that's a great point, right? Is you and I have both had different conversations with Doug by this time. And I think one of the great things that they have going on in Longmont is having that weekly potluck
Like, yeah.
dinner where obviously they have a dedicated space in the co-working space where it's just available and lends itself well to that type of meeting. But to build those kind of deeper level connections that I think everybody should really strive for, it is how do you get outside of just this always talking about me, and having these real connections and building friendships with people is what it really comes down to. And I think a meal is a great way to do that.
If I'm hearing you right, Elliot, you're saying we should look into starting our own co-working space in St. Louis.
Well, so it's funny that you bring that up. Back in the day when the local Fi St. Louis chapter was still meeting at the brewery, and that's all we were doing. This was after Mr. Money Mustache had started his co working space in Longmont. But this guy that I had met at St. Louis said that he was starting a co working space now, not with a bend necessarily just for the Phi community, but just a co working space. We've gotten into this situation, which is a great spot to have, but now we have 50 plus people at a local meetup on a random Thursday night. We're getting so big that it's starting to limit our spaces, right? And so, yeah, I don't know. We're going to have to start thinking about that to a degree, I think.
Set that idea aside for now, but I think it's something that we could potentially consider looking more closely at. If the attendance continues to hold at what it is or it continues to grow, yeah, we're gonna need bigger space, and maybe it's you and I that do that, Elliot. I don't know.
Yeah, well, what I was going to say is I know that Pete has recently talked about it. The financials of a co working space don't overlap well with the Phi community. I don't know if that goes back to our old episode of cheap versus frugal,
Mhm.
but it does have issues at times.
I think the name of our podcast here lends itself well to the name of a co-working space, though, as well.
Yeah, yeah, it certainly does.
It look nice on the side of a building.
Watch out.
Yep.
The 9 to 5 co working space coming to a local spot near you.
Yep. All right. Well, is there anything else we wanted to touch on with community?
So I think the only thing that I would want to do before we wrap here is challenge our listeners to say, well, what are you doing to build community in your own area? Are you going to your local meetups? I've heard we had somebody that came to our St. Louis meetup from over an hour away, I think closer to an hour and a half away. And I know that they've been trying to start the local chapter in their own area, but really just don't get enough people. But we just challenge everybody to say, what can you be doing in your own area to kind of facilitate this community that we both found incredibly rewarding for us?
Yeah, and just get out there and give it a shot. You don't have to commit to it every month or every week or whatever the format looks like. And you can just kind of dip in and dip out. I see a lot of that going on in our local group. And that can be beneficial for individuals, I think, as they just sit and listen and make maybe one connection or two connections that they can then take outside of the group and take back with them. And then maybe you just don't feel as isolated like you're on this path alone.
Exactly. All right, Josh. Well, before we leave, I just want to say catch us here on whether that's YouTube or a podcast player of your choice. Every Monday we have a new episode. But if you could do us a favor and like, subscribe, leave us a review, we would really appreciate it. This 9 to 5 podcast is a new thing, and anything we can do to get it to a few more years is great. So, once again, thanks, Josh. Great talking to you as always.
Same here, Elliot.
See ya.